What's up, Nashville? This is Bo Beach with the Free Speech Podcast, as always, presented by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage. As always, we are going to bring you the most recent stories coming from the Nashville commercial real estate business. We'll talk culture, we'll occasionally talk some politics, and even a little sports. I'm going to give you a rundown on the topics we'll discuss today, and then we'll get into it. Number one, I'm going to give you an update on retailer bankruptcies in this country. Lots going on with retailers not being able to survive in the inflationary environment in which we are suffering through. I'm going to explain to you what retailers are going out of business and what that means for Nashville commercial real estate. Next, I'm going to introduce you to what's called the Voce Hotel and Residences. I'm assuming it's pronounced Voce. It is spelled V-O-C-E, so maybe we'll go with Vos, but I would say Voce is probably more like it. Even if you don't like the name, which I personally don't, it doesn't seem very creative to me. The concept itself is very interesting. This is a project that is now coming out of the ground in Midtown, so I'm going to walk you through what that project entails. Next, 4 Nashville area hotels receive what's called a Michelin Guide Key, which is a very, very prestigious award. I'm going to walk you through those 4 hotels so you can know and recognize the most hoity-toity hotels in the Nashville area. Next, I'm going to talk to you about an interesting project happening in Germantown, a project first of its kind for that submarket. Next, a local bank goes all in on fast casual restaurants. I've never heard this before. I've never heard a bank focusing on earning the business of fast casual restaurants. We'll get into that. Next, the owners of the new Old Dominion bar sue Metro for holding their permit hostage. I'm going to tell you that story. Next, I'm going to give you kind of a hot take on the difference between college football fans and NFL football fans, and you can kind of fact check me on whether or not you think my take is accurate. And last, I'm going to riff a little bit on the current state of politics in this country. It just gets crazier and crazier, and I really think it comes down to a lack of critical thinking skills. I think we have an epidemic of people that cannot think for themselves, and it is getting us into a real mess. It's bringing us to the brink of really dividing this country up between the liberal states and the conservative states. We're getting really close to that place. And I've talked about it in episodes past, but regardless, I'm going to riff a little bit on the current state of politics in our country. Until then, let's get started. A retailer bankruptcy update. Columbus, Ohio-based Big Lots, which is true. I just drove through Columbus. We didn't have a show last week because I was traveling. I traveled through Louisville. I traveled through Cincinnati, I traveled through Columbus, and ultimately made it to our final destination, Cleveland. As I was driving through Columbus, Big Lots has its name all over different properties in that area. Columbus, Ohio-based Big Lots became the latest retailer to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection earlier this month. It plans to close more than 300 stores as part of its restructuring. Big Lots filing comes after mall and open-air center staples like Rue 21, Express, and The Body Shop announced plans earlier this year to close hundreds of stores. Discount retailer 99 Cents Only Stores said this spring it would close all of its 371 stores. LL Flooring Holdings, better known as Lumber Liquidators, and Conn's also have filed for bankruptcy this year, as did Red Lobster, with the Orlando, Florida-based chain closing more than 100 restaurants as part of its recently concluded Chapter 11 proceedings. Most of those sites were freestanding outparcels of shopping centers. All of that activity follows last year's bankruptcy filings by Rite Aid and Bed Bath & Beyond, with those moves continuing to have a significant ripple effect on the broader real estate economy. Rite Aid's reorganization plans called for more than 800 stores to be shuttered. We're seeing this all over the Nashville area, the fallout from the Rite Aid. Many of those buildings are being repurposed to dollar stores, if you've noticed. Bed Bath & Beyond closed nearly 900 locations. Historically, the recapture rate for rents after retailers close at a REIT, at a REIT center, so the REITs are tracking what is their recovery rate or the recapture rate when these retailers go bankrupt and they have to backfill those spaces. This particular REIT claims their bankruptcy filing recapture rate is 84%, which is really good. So you're effectively only losing 16% of the rents you otherwise would have received had that retailer not gone bankrupt and stopped paying rent. Mass store closures by a retailer like Big Lots are particularly significant because of the size of those stores. Typically 30,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet, and because it's a discount retailer, those sites aren't necessarily in top-tier Class A centers. Quote, what you're likely to see in a Big Lots bankruptcy is an impact to lesser quality properties, unquote. There's been a recent trend of non-traditional ventures, think pickleball courts or trampoline parks, filling these awkwardly sized retail boxes. It's also tough for retail landlords to demise a vacant retail space if there's no traction to backfilling something like a 40,000 square foot former Big Lots store. Retail spaces tend to be more deep than wide, and dividing that space even once could create an odd bowling alley shaped configuration. Plus, given the cost of construction today, a landlord would need to be able to raise rents significantly in the newly demised space to be whole again. Vacant retail spaces, especially large anchor stores, can have a cascading effect on a shopping center or mall, often leading to reduced curb appeal, a decline in foot traffic, and reduced revenue for other businesses in the vicinity. So we've had a lot of retail space come online and available to new users. The challenge is with spaces like the ones occupied by Big Lots, those spaces are in less attractive locations, and just the general shape of those spaces being more deep than wide makes them difficult to backfill unless you can attract a pickleball user or a trampoline park user. So we're going to continue to see the fallout from these retailer bankruptcies, not even taking into consider all of the restaurants that have currently been vacating space like we covered on the last show. So the retailer bankruptcy free-for-all continues. It is going to continue until our economy really stabilizes and can really catch up from all of the government-induced inflation that exists in our world today. We could not have had bigger fools in charge of our federal government than we've had the last 3.5 years, whereby they are borrowing money and printing money at unprecedented paces, while also during the scamdemic shutting down private business and choking off supply. So you are creating increased demand by printing money and borrowing money, and then you are choking off supply by forcing businesses to close down in your infinite wisdom, because a new cold virus came through and we shut down the world. So we had this huge supply-demand mismatch, which created inflation. At the end of the day, inflation is the byproduct of overspending by our federal government. And anybody that tells you differently is a member of the religion called the Democrat Party, whereby you don't have to have any critical thinking skills. You don't have to really understand how supply and demand affects prices. You just have to repeat what your religious leaders have told you. And the religious leaders in the Democrat Party have been spewing nonsense for years and continue to do so. In fact, Kamala Harris, in her infinite wisdom, continues to spew nonsense, believing that that nonsense is going to get her over the finish line and win the presidency of the United States, the most unqualified, most unimpressive presidential candidate in recent memory. If she wins, look for this country to begin to break apart. And we'll talk about that later in the show. Let's keep moving. Introducing the Voci Hotel and Residences. On-site pre-construction work is underway for the long-planned Voci Hotel and Residences Tower, with 1/3 of the future Midtown Buildings units being pre-sold. 1717 Hay Street is one block to the west of the two-tower Broad West development, a very, very impressive development that took something like 10 years to get done. Billed as a luxury building, the 25-floor Voci will feature 192 for-sale residences and 116 hotel rooms, all suites, in addition to about 60,000 square feet of office space. Voci will offer 1, 2, and 3-bedroom condos starting in the 500,000s. 3-bedroom units start at $1.5 million, with the building to offer up to 9 penthouses. Owners can choose between these 3 luxury furniture designs if they opt into the hotel model. The Voci 25th level rooftop deck will boast a 6,000 square foot restaurant bar adjacent to its pool, with the deck to offer views of the city's downtown and midtown skylines. Other amenities will include a 5,000 square foot ground floor restaurant, coffee and juice bar, health, wellness, fitness center, spa, full-time concierge services, golf simulator lounge, bike storage and shop, 5,000 square foot event conference space with adjacent 1-bedroom hospitality suite, designated parking spaces, valet service, package delivery and pickup center, ride-share portico, and a 2,500 square foot outdoor dog park. So what you've got here is a very unique design whereby you're combining owned condos, hotel rooms, and office space, with those condos to be able to be easily put into the rental pool for those folks that want to earn some money while they're not using their condo. A concept very, very popular in Florida, for example. So if you aren't going to be living there full time, but are going to be living in your condo part time, you can make some money to offset the cost of that condo by letting the on-site operators put it into their rental pool. Let's keep moving. Excuse me, it's that time of year. If you don't know, September is one of those months that is very, very difficult from an allergy perspective. So if you're someone that's got allergy issues or just generally has sinus issues like myself, September is a tough time. So forgive me. 4 Nashville area hotels receive Michelin Guide keys, or Michelin Guide awards, if you want to think about it. Michelin Guide ranks hotels by 1, 2, or 3 keys, judged off of 5 categories: design, service, character, value, and a significant contribution to the guest experience. There are only 16 3-key hotels in the country. 72 key hotels in this country, and 207 one-key hotels in the 2024 Michelin Guide. Franklin's South Hall Farm and Inn, Downtown's One Hotel Nashville, and WeHo's Soho House all received one key. The Hermitage Hotel, a staple in downtown Nashville since 1910, received 2 keys. South Hall Farm and Inn opened in December 2022. Its 325 acres of working farmland include a 7-acre lake, 1,300 tree apple orchard, and a plethora of activities for guests. One Hotel Nashville opened in 2022 as well, adding 215 rooms and a focus on sustainability to downtown Nashville. It's a high luxury, high design, ultra sustainable hospitality experience. I often think, does anyone really care that the hotel that they're staying in is so-called sustainable? Are we really picking hotels based on their utility consumption or how they handle waste? I never have. I think that's insanity. Maybe you have to be in the Democrat cult to care about sustainability when you're choosing a hotel. Soho House Nashville has been a driver of development in the Wedgwood, Houston neighborhood since opening in 2022 as well. Big year for Nashville, 2022. It is a members-only property. The good news is for hotel guests is that room key makes you a member for the night. Lastly, the 122-room Hermitage Hotel received a redesign in 2022 and is home to Druzy and Dar, which I assume is a restaurant. The Hermitage is still the place with the Italian marble entryway, the stained glass ceiling in the lobby, and the Russian walnut paneling. And it's still the most prestigious place to stay in all of Nashville. Believe it or not, I've never stayed at any of these hotels. I am a person that prefers to stay in my own home, which I like very much. But for those folks that are visiting Nashville, we absolutely welcome you here. All tourists are welcome. Not only is Nashville a great place to be a tourist, but Franklin and Williamson County also outstanding places to visit. Let's keep moving. Atlanta-based North Point Hospitality is planning a 260-room hotel at 1500 3rd Avenue North, which would be the first hotel of its scale in the Germantown neighborhood, right? That's what makes it interesting, as Germantown does not have any high-rise hotels until now. The hotel will rise 8 stories and offer 5,000 square feet of ground-level retail space. The brand of the hotel is unclear. If the project comes to fruition, it will be the North Point's 4th hotel in Nashville. The firm also owns the AC Hotel, Residence Inn, and Spring Hill Suites downtown. So Germantown, one of the hottest submarkets in Nashville, along with Midtown and Music Row, soon to receive its first high-rise hotel. 260 rooms, which is a lot of rooms. You know, we just talked about the Hermitage being kind of the goat of Nashville. They just have over 100 hotel rooms. We're talking about a 260-room hotel coming to Germantown. So Germantown continues to be on fire. This project will make it even more impressive. Next, a local bank goes all in on fast casual restaurants. I personally think this is a very interesting story. Let's get into it. The gentleman who started this bank, called Sonata Bank, his name is Farzin Ferdowsi. Farzin Ferdowsi. He is a former owner of 86 Taco Bell locations, so he's seen it all, including the difficulty in finding and hiring employees, increased employee turnover, and an emphasis and attention on providing managers and full-time workers with benefits, but not part-time workers, where this is where he sees kind of the opportunity, right? These part-time workers are the workers that are so hard to hang on to, right? So what he's trying to do is make these positions a little bit more sticky, as we would say in the business, meaning harder to leave, right? And that's what a lot of employers think about offering benefits, right? So if you can offer benefit packages, that makes it harder for your employees to leave because they'd be giving up a lot more than just their salary or their pay. However, it's these part-time workers who are the backbone of the restaurant industry who don't receive anything except their salary. Quote, it's a bank that is trying to help people who are unbankable and educate those people in financial learning, Ferdowsi said. The Brentwood headquartered bank will serve two distinct customer segments. One, business and personal customers in Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky, and two, fast casual restaurant franchisees and employees. According to Ferdowsi, quick service restaurants have the highest employee turnover of any industry, with turnover rates starting at 150%, which he partially attributes to part-time employees not receiving any additional benefits. Through Sonata's QSR services, though Sonata's QSR services are still in the research phase and haven't fully launched, Ferdowsi said some of the benefits Sonata plans to offer nationwide via its online app include access to telehealth, cell phone insurance, tow truck services, and virtual veterinary services. So if you'll see here, this seems to me to be access to benefits that don't necessarily cost the employer anything, right? And as I was a large employer earlier in my life, I always thought it was peculiar that health insurance, for example, had to flow through the employer. You know, I always thought it would be a better product if the employer could certainly, if the employer can instead, right, offer a portal to those employees so they could pick and choose the benefits they wanted and then pay for those benefits directly. I always thought that would be a more appropriate model. I never thought you should ever be getting health care services through your employer. It didn't make sense as the employer, and it didn't really make sense as the employee. You really want people, consumers, to be choosing their own services and be the ones bearing the cost of those services. So they are shopping for those services that make sense to them and have a value proposition to them, right? To just pay for these services and provide them to all of your employees at the employer's cost never made sense to me. I never thought it was the employer's responsibility. I never thought it made any real sense from the perspective of the employee. You know, many years ago, people started getting healthcare insurance through their employer, being big, massive companies, because the way that those expenses were accounted for come tax time, they really benefited the employer, right? So if the employer pays for your benefits, they got outsized returns when it came to income tax time. So that's really what motivated employers to start beginning to provide these benefits for their employees. I personally never thought, as a small business owner, it was my place to be providing healthcare services to my employees. I always thought there had to be a better way where I could at least provide them access to a menu of options for them to shop from without my direct involvement. These services will be offered to restaurant employees through franchisees. Quote, we're trying to find those avenues where we can really deliver regardless of who they are, how old they are, and what their banking status is. The argument being many of these part-time employees are younger or perhaps immigrants that are not involved in the banking system in this country. So they're trying to offer benefits to these part-time workers, even if they do not have current involvement in the banking system. Several franchise locations, including Taco Bell, Wingstop, Buffalo Wild Wings, Panera, Pizza Hut, KFC, and Arby's, have already directly invested in Sonata. So, I think historically, there hasn't been a whole lot of entrepreneurial vision in these banks. Most of these banks are just a carbon copy of one another. They don't really offer different services. They're all kind of chasing the same customers. Supposedly, they all have all these federal regulations they have to abide from, and now every single borrower has to be treated exactly the same. Even if you have a 20-year relationship with the bank, you have to be treated exactly the same as the guy that just walks in off the street. So banking, in my opinion, is kind of archaic in that it doesn't evolve. There's no real unique selling propositions involved in most banking, and there's no real flexibility to really give any type of extra treatment to those longtime customers that that will repay. You've got to treat everybody the same. So what's the point of being a longtime customer of a bank? Why not just bounce around to whatever bank is willing to make you the next loan you need to make if they're all going to act exactly the same? It seems to me that in business you want to carve out a niche, right? The last thing you want to be is exactly the same as your competition. But for whatever reason, the banking industry is not behaved that way. They all behave exactly the same. And I've actually lost a lot of faith in the banking industry. I'm building a project right now, and as I was speaking to lenders, it was really kind of shocking to me how inflexible they were, how unwilling to actually make loans to people that need the money. Everybody wants to lend to people that don't need the money. Well, that doesn't really solve many problems in our world. At some point, if you're me, I'm 42 years old. I've never not repaid a loan in my entire life. When I go out because I'm in a little bit of a cash crunch and I need to borrow some money, you would think there'd be a bank out there that would want to borrow money to a guy that's been repaying his loan for 2 years. Turns out not anymore, right? The banking industry is very, very unimpressive in my opinion, to the extent where I was thinking, what would it be possible to just live your life outside the banking system, right? Whereby you didn't even really participate, because if they aren't going to be helpful when you need the money, what's the point? I ultimately had to go out and borrow money privately from a friend of mine, which worked out wonderfully, and I'm thankful for that friend. But it got me thinking, perhaps I should just shift my perspective on this matter and try to live a life outside the banking system. And I'm still kind of collecting my thoughts on that matter. But there's nothing more painful than trying to borrow money from a bank. It is a horrible process that is really set up for employees that have W-2 income. If you're someone that is an entrepreneur making your own in the world, for whatever reason, it's much more to borrow money from a lender. So I would love to see some creative entrepreneurship in that space. I mean, all entrepreneurs are up for grabs because the banking system as it exists today is not catering to us. They aren't really properly calculating risk when it is an entrepreneur walking into the bank looking to borrow money. They're focused on the wrong things. Really, all these banks want to focus on is how much federal income tax you pay, right? So everything's about federal income tax statements. Show me how much federal income tax you pay. Oh, you don't pay enough federal income tax, so we can't borrow you money. It's really a racket and ripe for disruption. But for whatever reason, I don't see it. I don't see it happening. And along with many other people in our country, I'm very disillusioned by what the banks have done the last few years. Let's keep moving. Owners of the new Old Dominion bar sued the city, Metro, for holding their permit hostage. And this happens more than you realize. So many municipalities, whether it be a town, a village, a city, Metro, they want something. They're always trying to get something out of the person that's trying to get the permit, right? So they'll say, oh, we need you to put in sidewalks, for example. And once you put in those sidewalks, we'll approve that you did it right. And then you're going to sign over ownership to the municipality for that sidewalk. Or, oh, you're trying to build a building on a street that has not yet been paved. No problem. We'll give you the permit to build that building, but you've got to pave the entire street and then sign over your rights to that street to the municipality if you want your building permit. This stuff happens all of the time. The firm behind a high-profile celebrity bar project in Midtown is suing Metro for extortionate permit conditions. Good Time Design Hospitality Group filed a lawsuit claiming that Metro leveraged its permitting power to require the firm to replace existing city infrastructure at an enormous expense. Good Time Design revealed last year that its partnership with country music band Old Dominion to transform the former Rebar space into a neighborhood bar called Odie's, the firm paid $7 million for the site located at 1919 Division Street. Good Time Design obtained a permit to renovate the bar last year, but as a condition of the permit, Metro required the firm to replace and upsize the existing water line along Division Street. Rather than improve public infrastructure at its own expense, Metro was able to leverage its permitting power to exact the substantial infrastructure improvement from Lonesome without paying for it. Lonesome is the owner. Even though it was unnecessary and unrelated to Lonesome's use of the property, court documents state. Good Time is planning interior renovations along with 3,194 square feet of additions to the existing building. The construction cost of the project is valued at $1.7 million. When Lonesome asked Metro to justify its demand that Lonesome upgrade the water line with evidence that Lonesome's proposed use of the property would somehow render the existing water line inadequate, Metro refused to do so. So basically they said, hey, prove to us that this water line even needs to be upgraded for our permit to be issued. Metro refused to do so. After Metro refused to reconsider its permit condition, the firm, under protest and at its own expense, undertook the work to replace the water line along Division Street. The plaintiff spent at least hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses to improve the water line. Good Time Design is seeking compensation for the firm's expense on the water line, as well as costs, attorney's fees, and litigation expenses. Keep in mind, the city has tried and failed to charge developers for their project's impacts. In 2020, a state house committee ended a measure that would have allowed Nashville to add an impact fee to new residential and commercial developments to bolster the city's revenue. So, this seems pretty straightforward to me. What's happening is they are extorting developers, people that are taking great risks at great expense to improve properties. They're extorting them to also improve public infrastructure. This has been going on forever, and anyone that's ever tried to get a permit from any municipality knows it is a difficult and painstaking project. It takes so long, it costs so much. If you finally get to the finish line, they say, oh, we're going to give you this permit, but you have to do $200,000 of work for us that's really not even related to your project. And if you'll spend that extra $200,000, we'll give you the permit. Well, we're so far into the deal, we already own the property. We've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on soft costs. We've already got all of our financing lined up. They've got you over a barrel, right? They are literally extorting developers to hand over this piece of paper that says, hey, you can take all that risk, you can spend all that money, you can improve this property, but give us a couple $100,000 of work for us and we'll give it to you. So I love to see people pushing back on this, because if you don't push back on the government, whether it be the local, the state, or the federal government, they will continue to steal more and more and more. We've seen this at the federal level, right? the federal level is the worst level. Usually the local level is the best level, and then you go to the state level, the next best, and then the federal government. They're always the worst, right? I think about the federal government, these fools that think the federal government is somehow going to be their savior. The federal government is much more likely to be your adversary than they are your savior. If you are waiting for the federal government to save you, you are absolutely doomed. The best you can ask for out of a federal government is for that federal government to cause you less problems, right? Our current federal government causes more and more and more problems. If we can get Trump into office with the policies that he's proposing, the federal government is going to start causing less and less and less problems. You're never going to have a perfect government at any level, but the best you can ask for is a government that causes less problems. And that's exactly what you're going to get with the policies that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are going to bring into the office. And if you don't see that, we are just different. We are different. I almost think if we did brain scans of all, Republicans and Democrats, you take the free thinking independents out of it, Team Democrat, Team Republican, if we scan their brains, I'm telling you, I think there is going to be a noticeable and physical difference in different areas of our brain because we just are computing information differently. Our perspectives are so different. What we think is important are so different that I almost think it is not just a matter of consuming the wrong information or consuming different information. I think there might actually be differences in how our brains work. This is just a riff now. I mean, obviously this is not the business that I'm in. But when I see Democrats behaving the way they behave, saying the things they say, focusing on the things they focus on, and I think, we aren't the same. We're both humans, but you're a different kind of human than I am. I mean, there's no way to reconcile the difference in perspectives just by, one consumes the propaganda of mainstream media and one doesn't. I think that perhaps oversimplifies. I think there are hormonal differences in Democrats versus Republicans, and I think there might even be actual physical differences in our brains. I might be wrong about that. We'll see. All right, I'm going to keep riffing now. We've covered all of the commercial real estate stories of the day. I want to present a thought to you about football, right? I took some time off from football. Didn't follow it too much. Never really loved playing the game of football. I was always a basketball player. Basketball season comes right after football season. So while I played football, I was really just trying to stay busy but not get injured for basketball season. So I've never been the hardcore football guy that's pushing weights all year round and trying to get big and strong and willing to smash my head into other people's heads. I've never been that guy, but different points in my life, I've enjoyed watching it from entertainment purposes, and then I took some time off. Now I'm getting back into it. So I've been thinking about this. I think there are two different distinct groups of people. There are folks that prefer to watch college football, and then there are folks that prefer to watch NFL, professional football. And I will tell you that I am very much in the camp of college football. I can't force myself to watch NFL football. I just do not enjoy it. I do not care. It's not worthy of my time, given all of the commercial breaks and the fact that, there's really little game action in 3 hours of a football game. You've got to really enjoy the game action to suffer through all of the commercials. But here's my take on this. If you were a person that went to college, right? I don't care if you graduated, anybody that, or maybe just lived in a college town, you got the college experience, right? Anybody that's lived any of the college experience, I think later in life they prefer to watch college football. That's their thing. For those folks that never had the college experience, the more blue collar folks that never lived in a college town, And don't get me wrong, I got no problem with blue collar people. You know, I get along with blue collar people just fine. I'm not talking down to anybody. But I think those folks that didn't have the college experience, they latch more onto the NFL football. So, you know, I think you get that vibe if you've ever been to an NFL game versus a college game. The type of people that are attending are different. You know, I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just saying different. So my hot take on football is anyone that's lived the college experience prefers college football, gets excited about college football. Anyone that did not partake in that college experience, they latch more onto professional football. And, you know, tell me what you think about that. You know, maybe that's not that hot of a take. It's just something I've been thinking about. And lastly, politics. Can you believe the state of politics in this country? First of all, I don't believe anything that the mainstream media has to say. I don't believe any of the mainstream polling. I think it is all a hustle. It is all bought and paid for in an effort to maintain power. If you are someone that turns on the TV to get your news, I hate to tell you, you are not getting any news. You are consuming propaganda. The only way to really figure out what's actually going on in this world, in my opinion, is citizen journalism, right? Whereby you've got Joe Blow, who has devoted his life to covering a specific topic. He doesn't report to a big company. There is no one that filters what he has to say. He is an impressive, authentic person who you trust, who is trying to make sense of the information available to him. Those citizen journalists are the only source of accurate information in our world today. Anything that appears on a television screen is not real news. It is bought and paid for propaganda. So, if you're someone that is just so confused by how both sides can be in such polar opposite positions, I first think you start with, what information am I consuming? And is it authentic, real information? Or is it bought and paid for, like many of the polls that are presented on TV are, right? Those polls, who's paying for the polls? Have you ever thought about this? Who pays for these polls, right? There is a business that is, as a service, provides polling information. One needs to know who's paying that business to do all of that work. They aren't doing it out of the kindness of their heart, right? They need to be compensated if you're going to stay in business. These are not-for-profits that are taking donations. These are for-profit businesses in the business of polling. And I think if you really got into how that works, you have one party paying a polling company to provide them with polling that tells the story they wanted to tell. And there's lots of different ways to do that, but the most simple way is you just poll people that are more likely to respond in the way you're hoping to respond so you can provide the result that you've been paid to provide, right? I always say, no one's ever polled me. I'm 42 years old. Not a single person has ever polled me on who I'm going to vote for in any election, right? Who's being polled, right? How are they choosing these people? It's certainly not at random. There's no such thing as at random when there's money involved, right? So I'm telling you, the polling that exists, that is being pitched on these mainstream media channels, is not real information. It's bought and paid for. I don't care who it says is winning. I don't care who it says is losing. It just depends on who paid for it, right? I do not think the 2024 presidential election is going to be close. I think it is propaganda presented to us as consumers to make believe that somehow it is going to be a close election. I do not believe it's going to be close. In fact, I think Republicans are going to win the presidency. I think the Republicans are going to retain the House. and I think they're going to blow out the Senate. I don't think the Senate's even going to be close. I think we're going to have all three branches of government, and we're finally going to start to be able to peel back the layers of the onion, this rotten carcass of an onion that we call the federal government. And we're going to start peeling back layers, and we're just going to throw them in the dumpster until we can get to the very core, the least corrupted core. And then we're going to start rebuilding from there. That is my prediction. Maybe it is simply hopeful thinking, but I do not believe any of the information you're being presented in the form of a poll is accurate and reflects exactly what's happening in this country. I think the majority of it is bought and paid for. You know, the Democrats are substantially outspending the Republicans. The Democrats are different than the Republicans in that they will do anything they possibly can to win and retain power, whereby the Republicans are still living this existence of nobility and being a good person and doing what's right. You know, that's the reason that the Republicans have been losing so many elections over the last 20 years is the Democrats play to win and the Republicans play to be noble. I also think, you know, if you really had to describe the two camps, you know, I think Democrats are good at politics, which just simply means winning elections. And I think conservatives are much better at actually governing, right? So you've got a mismatch. You've got the win at all cost Democrats that are good at politics but bad at governing. And then you've got the conservatives, which are better at governing but bad at politics. And at some point, right, at some point, the conservatives are going to have to up their game, because this idea of somehow this nobility, this honorable approach to politics is somehow going to sweep the country is not reality, right? We've got too many low information voters. We've got too many folks that have adopted the Democrat Party as their religion. And once you've adopted anything as a religion, this idea that common sense is going to dictate how you respond to things is no longer. It is a faith, right? The Democrat Party has a large group of people that follows in lockstep with their opinions through faith, not through critical thinking, not through independent thought, not through common sense. They are following their leader and doing as they're told. And conservatives are going to have to up their game in the coming years if we're going to get this country back on track. And if it's not possible to get this country back on track, let's start the process of separating states. I really think it would be the best thing to ever happen to the conservative movement is just to cut the dead weight loose. Let them have their policies. Let them have their tax and spend policies. Let them have their social policies. Let them have the corruption. Let them have the failing schools. Let them have the debt, right? Let them have the inflation. Let's start over from scratch in our own country, right? I think that is a better outcome than having even like a 55-45 majority in this country, 55 conservative, 45 Democrat, right? I think that would be the best available outcome. That's going to take real courage. It's probably going to take some horrible things happening to really push people in that direction. But I do think the best case scenario would be to cut these liberal states loose. Let's do our own thing based on our own policies. Let's live with the products of our decision making, and let's let them live with the results of their decision making. So I think I'm going to leave it at that, y'all. I know it's that time of year where everybody's kind of worn out by politics, myself included. It's hard for me to comprehend how dumb the Democrat Party has gotten. They say almost zero that I agree with. It is all fruity-tooty, emotional, therapist speak. If we feel good, if we're happy, if we have joy, everything's going to be okay. What are you talking about? All that matters is the policy. No one's looking up to you folks like you're impressive. No one trusts you. This idea that you're a joyful, cackling person, that's all you need to make policy for the most powerful country on earth is so dumb. The fact that that is the strategy to win a national election is a vibe, is so incredibly dumb that it almost feels like we are in a simulation. It almost feels like we're being tested. Like, how much can we get away with before there will be an uprising, right? And it seems to me that we're getting close because it just gets dumber and dumber and dumber. And I do think we're going to get a change in November. I think the change is going to be very, very positive. I don't think the change is going to solve all of our problems because the other side is just going to fight tooth and nail to prevent any of it from happening. And perhaps that response, that delusional, hysterical response will finally be enough to say, you know what, you take these 25 states, we'll take these 25 states. We're gonna live differently than you want to live. You live the way you want to live. We'll live how we want to live. You will no longer affect us. We will no longer affect you. Better for everyone, right? I think conservatives would be much more open-minded to that than liberals would be. Liberals are going to try to pull the conservatives along and force us to conform to their way of thinking, whereby the conservatives are going to say, you know what, good riddance to y'all, good luck. Who knows? Maybe we're getting closer. I can only dream. Well, thank you so much. This has been the Free Speech Podcast with Bo Beach, presented by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage. We are commercial real estate brokers for sellers in the Southeast. If there is anything we can do for you in regards to listing and selling your commercial property, I encourage you very much to reach out and we'll do our best to help. Until next week.